If we want to create a deeper connection with our audience, it's important that we're using authentic storytelling. Today, we have Tracy Brinkmann on the podcast to talk all about how he uses his unique story to impact his listeners on a deeper level. We also talk about some strategies around marketing, around not sharing from a place of hurt, but from healed, and using our podcast to make the impact that we want to make. There might be some conversations in here that might be triggering for some listeners. You can check the show notes for those specific content warnings. And if you are someone who is struggling with this, we will have the exact timestamps that you can skip for that section. Or if you get to the part where I say, I have a story to tell, and then we'll hear yours, then you can skip forward about 5 minutes to get through the more traumatic stories that we share around the things that we went through and how it led to us podcasting about these impactful things. The rest of the conversation should be free of triggers, but we'll have any notes in the show notes and the YouTube description for those specifically. Please join me in welcoming Tracy to the podcast. Welcome to Podcasting Unlocked, the show for purpose-driven podcasters. I'm Alesia Galati, founder of Galati Media, and I'm here to share actionable strategies to help you amplify your message and grow your audience. Hello, Tracy. Super excited to have you on the podcast today. If you could start by telling everyone who you are, what you do, and a bit about your podcast.
Oh my goodness. I am the humble Tracy Brinkmann, aka the Dark Horse Entrepreneur from the podcast of the same name. I actually have two podcasts. I also have another one called the Your Success DNA. That one's all about personal development. The Dark Horse Entrepreneur, kind of self-explanatory. It's the Dark Horse Entrepreneur. But we focus in on parents looking to do their cubicle escape, escape the 9 to 5. And we've really focused in of late on helping them do that via AI. And then, behind that, I service local businesses with email and marketing campaigns. I love local marketing.
Yeah, in the episode previous to yours, we talked a lot about getting out in your local network, which is honestly something that I've never really considered. And I'm from a small-ish town. I wouldn't call it a small town. There's like 5 churches in a 1-mile radius because I'm in the Bible Belt. But I don't really consider it small town, but I've never even considered the idea, because most of my clients are virtual, or all of my clients are virtual, that I could be offering strategic services locally. And so I've got some ideas from that conversation. If you haven't listened to that, definitely go back to the previous guest episode to check that out. But today we're going to talk about sharing your struggles from a place of authenticity, creating a deeper impact with your audience. And to set us up, I'm going to share a story, and then I want to hear your story about how you got to into doing this work. I grew up in a cult. And if you've listened to the podcast for any amount of time, you know this about me. But I grew up in a cult, and it was from the ages of 11 to 20-ish was when my mom left, 2021. And it was supposed to be a women's program that was supposed to be 18 months, help her get clean, and then we were going to leave. But it was one of the very few programs where women were able to go and bring their children. And so that was a huge selling point. I remember being 11, I'm the oldest of 5 kids, being 11 and being like, what an incredible place. We are with our mother. She's clean. Right. We have food. We have clothes. They might not all fit, but who cares? We have clothes and we have all these things. This is great. I am so happy to be here. And then I got to the point where when I was 17 and I wanted to go to college after finishing high school, they were like, oh, no, you have to go to the college associated with us or you cannot come back to home. And at that point, I have no job experience. I have no money. I don't know how to drive a car because I've been in this cult, right? Yeah. For so much time. So then fast forward 2019, my mom overdoses. At that point, me and my sister, we were kind of finding ways to therapeutically process our loss and our grief. And one of the questions that kept coming up for us was, why in the world did she join that cult? Why did we stay? What draws people to cults? And so we started a podcast called Two Sisters and a Cult, where we talked about cults from the perspective of being cult survivors. And at the time, a lot of the podcasts were around either true crime aspects of cults or they were comedy podcasts about cults. It's like there
Sure.
wasn't really any in between. And the reason I'm sharing this story is because the number of people that reached out to us in the first 3 to 6 months that we launched this podcast that said, "Oh my goodness, me too," was incredible. And at that point, we hadn't even shared our full story. We gave little bits and tidbits and information, and we weren't really naming names or any of that stuff. It was just, here's how this cult that we're talking about today relates to the one that we grew up in.
Hmm.
And it was that, I think, was the moment that I realized, whoa, there's something here in this podcasting thing where when we share our stories, it connects with people on such a deep and intimate level that goes beyond anything else that I'd seen. And I mean, my degree's in marketing, that I'd seen in any other space. So I know you have quite a story that you share as well. And so let's go ahead and get into that.
Well, I grew up in a cult as well. I'm kidding. Well, I could say that, a little tongue in cheek. My dad was a 23-year military veteran and
Yeah.
cult. Hello.
Yeah.
Anyway, right out of high school, I joined the military as well. But that's not the story we're here to talk about. When it comes to podcasting, for me, I'll do the Cliff Notes version and race forward, and then we can dig where you like. Came out of high school, jumped into the military. After that, got out into Southern California, started a little business, got into addiction.
Mm.
And inside of that, I used my entrepreneurial skills to pay for my habit to the point where 5-0 kicked open my door. That was an aha moment. I wasn't there, luckily, but I had a 3-month-old baby. And I had my dad in my ear mentally going family first, family first. And now I have this young baby and I have to fix my life. So I get myself cleaned up, get into corporate America, start my reign across corporate America, Coca-Cola out in Atlanta. My second daughter comes into the picture. She comes in to the picture about 45 days early with a distended abdomen and needing operations. In 3 months, she had like 6 major operations just to level to get her safe enough, stable enough to have a liver and small bowel transplant. Over the course of 18 months, all kinds of craziness goes on. And unfortunately, she passes away. I had to make the tough decision to disconnect her from the life saving machines that were basically keeping her alive at that point. So here I am going through what has to be, as a parent, one of the worst things you could ever experience. I know I would never wish it upon my worst enemy. I could fall back into addiction. I know how safe and numbing that can be because, like, I experienced it, but I didn't want to. I didn't like that part of my life. And so I leaned forward into personal development. And thank goodness I did. And this was about the same time frame when all the big names, Tony Robbins, Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, all those, Brian Tracy, they were doing those big stadium tours. I went to all of them because I lived in Atlanta. They were there quite often. I started taking action against the stuff I was learning. And I saw this meteoric rise. I had like 5 promotions in 3 years inside of
Wow.
Coca-Cola, which is unheard of, which had people going up to me going, how
What are
did
you
you?
doing?
Yeah, right. Who do you know? And I started telling them, this is what I'm doing, and this is where I learned it, and this is, what when I got out of what I learned. And they're like, can you coach me? So that started kind of a coaching thing, late 90s, early 2000s. And about 2007, I found a platform called Blog Talk Radio, where I started my first podcast. And I started sharing the lessons I had learned in my life and from these people I had been going to see and reading the books and doing the tapes and all the noise. And I started, like you said, people going, "Oh, wait, me too," right? Or what did you get out of that? How did you get that lesson? Or where did you learn this? And, you start teaching, which for me, the whole learn, do, teach, you learn something, then you do that something. Then if you teach that something, you almost have to learn that something a little deeper. So that started a deeper dive into the personal development world. And about 2012, I jumped off of Blog Talk Radio and started a real podcast. And that's the Your Success DNA, which is still around today. Gosh, what, 12 years later. Anyway, and so that started that journey. However, I think to really answer your question, there was a point in my life where I was going through a wicked divorce, bankruptcy. My life was in flippin' turmoil. So I hung up my microphone because I felt like an imposter. I was getting on a microphone saying, here's all the amazing things you could do to have an amazing life. Meanwhile, I'm going through all the things I said I was going through. Today, if I would experience that same thing, I know that I would hop on the microphone and say, all right, ladies and gentlemen, here's what's going on, and tell that story and let people in. But at that point, just was a little over a decade and a half ago, I wasn't comfortable. So I wasn't willing to tell that part of the story yet. And it took me about 2 or 3 years to get there. And I picked the microphone back up and started a second podcast. And here we are.
I love it. Wow, what a journey. That's so incredible. I think that, you know, so often we can use podcasting as a way to therapeutically process things and
Mm-hmm.
to kind of, like you said, I'm going to pick the microphone up and talk through this.
Right.
But I also think that there's something so incredible about talking about it from a place that's more healed as
Mm-hmm.
well, right? And so it's about finding, I guess, that balance. And how do you find that balance when you're talking to your podcast listeners, having such deep and impactful stories that might need trigger warnings, right? Like having some
Right.
of those
Yeah.
while storytelling, but also teaching these lessons and really being able to find that balance between the two and almost compartmentalize depending on the episode. How do you balance that?
You know, I don't, because I come from the perspective of this is who I am. I'm Tracy, AKA Ace, sometimes depending on what moniker I'm taking up, but they're both the same person, right? Ace is just a nickname. This is who I am. This is my style. And ladies and gentlemen, trust me, if I have to give you a trigger warning, you probably don't want to be listening to my show, right? Because I'm just going to go at it. Every once in a while, I'll drop an F bomb. It's not very often. I don't cuss like a sailor, but there are those moments when you're in the heat and that word, it just fits.
Right.
So it's going to go in there. And if that offends you, you probably don't want to be listening to my show. One of the things I did early on is I did an episode called The 10 Reasons Why You Should Not Listen to Me. And it was a very popular episode because I was just kind of flipping things on. Everyone's talking about, here's all the reasons why you should listen to me. I'm sitting there telling you, here's the reasons you shouldn't. And, obviously I did 10 reasons why you shouldn't. And they were very logical and a little tongue in cheek. And then right behind that, I also did 10 reasons why you should.
Right.
But it was just a marketing play. But at the same time, just being who you are, I think draws resonant people towards you. Even out in the ecosphere, it draws those people that resonate with you towards you, and it repels the people that you probably don't want to deal with anyway. If I'm going to go into a topic that's extra sensitive, I'll share a little, hey, if this is something that really it's going to flip your switch, you might just want to skip past this. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll record the whole episode and re-listen to it. If I catch that, I'll record a little warning message saying, hit that 30-second forward 2 or 3 times, and then you can still listen to the rest of the episode.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I love the concept of having an episode of 10 Reasons Not to Listen to the
Hmm.
podcast because it's such a great way. Like you said, everybody's constantly saying, here are all the reasons that you should listen to me. And I'm such great stuff.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm not for everyone. And I think that's the beauty of podcasting. We have one client where she talks about creating boundaries and healthy boundaries with your family from the 10-step program type of
Hmm.
side and approach. And she curses a lot and we don't filter it. And that's just everything's marked explicit. And it is what it is. And it's like either you're for me or you're not, and that's
Exactly.
okay. And I think that in today's age, we have to own that and not make ourselves something that we're not, because if we
Mhm.
try to make ourselves for everybody, we're not gonna attract the people that we want to be having these deeper conversations with.
Yeah. You wanna know who your audience is. Like you said, you got a degree in marketing. You totally get this. You wanna know who it is you wanna be talking to. And if you don't know who you need to be talking to, you need to go back to the drawing board because you don't wanna be for everybody. And then once you know who you're talking to, then you know what to say, what not to say, what language you can and cannot use. In the Dark Horse Entrepreneur podcast, I, in the past couple of years, have narrowed my audience down to parents that want to do a 9 to 5 escape or just want to augment their 9 to 5 revenue. Okay, well, if they're parents, I try to be mindful of my language because they may be listening to the podcast in the car on
Right.
the way to school or on the way from school. So I try to be mindful of that. And like I said, it still comes out every once in a while. We'll mark it accordingly. But yeah, again, just be yourself. I think that's one of the cool things about podcasting is you can just be yourself and people will find you as a result of that.
Yeah, you get to be your cool, awesome self, and it works. It
There it
really
is.
does. That's so great about, like, narrowing your audience down. I'm curious when you did that, because we have seen some people do that where, maybe they were talking to a broader audience, and
Mhm,
then when they narrowed it down, seeing that immediate shift in the audience a little bit of,
mhm.
like, maybe the numbers went down, but it ends up exponentially helping them. So, was that something that you saw when you made that kind of narrowed down or niche down?
I did see a negative impact in the numbers initially, and when I say initially, it was like 3 or 4 months. It's like things fell because here's what I did, I tried to be the mindful host, and it's just like a business. Someone walks into your business and they think you're a restaurant an Italian restaurant, and you're like, "No, we sell burgers and fries." Well, then they're gonna turn and walk out
Right.
because they walked in wanting spaghetti or lasagna or whatever else. So I tried to be the mindful host and I did an episode. It was really short, really punchy. It was like, okay, we're changing directions. Here's what's going on. Here's what we were doing. Here's what we're going to do. And here's why. You are welcome to come along for the ride because I think if you are a regular entrepreneur, you're still going to get value
Right.
because XYZ. If you're a parent, you definitely want to come, just tell the story. And a number of folks figured, that's it, I'm out. Okay, that's fine. If they unsubscribe, they're not going to buy from you.
Right.
It's really that simple. If you send an email out saying, hey, here's what we're doing. We're all doing all these great things. Would you like to buy? And they say, click on subscribe. They weren't going to buy from you.
Right.
So you don't want them on your list anyway, because a lot of the major service providers that are out there are monitoring your emails. They're saying, hey, you sent 100 emails out and only 2 people opened. We're going to start throttling you back. And now you're going to start falling into the promotions folder and the spam folder.
Yeah, but I mean, it definitely applies, right? I think that so often I see this with, like, my Instagram account, right?
Mhm,
On my hobby podcast, my fun for funsies podcast, where, once a month I might look and see what are the general numbers looking like. And I'll see a
mhm.
point where, like, I was very clear on my values. And I was like, here are my values. This is the type of content you can expect from me. If that's not your thing, like, it's all about reading diversely, specifically around romance. If reading diversely is not like something you're interested in, then I'm probably not for you, because you're wasting your time
There it is.
and mine, and that's okay, right? Like,
Yeah.
there are plenty of other people that you can go follow, but I
Mhm.
talk about diverse romance over here. And so if that's not for you, or you don't like, open door scenes, then please, there are tons of accounts you can follow. And I did see that drop right away, especially when I said, here are my values and here are the things that I stand on.
Mhm.
And I was like, that's okay. Like, obviously, I don't want them following me anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and that's like going out and, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna start an account. I need to build up a following." Oh, and then you get the ad that says, "Hey, we can help you build up your followers." And, you get all these forget the ghost and the bot accounts. Let's just say they're not in the mix. And you get all these people into your sphere of influence on your account that don't vibe with you.
Right.
And if they don't bother to unfollow, well, then that drags your number down, and it's
Right.
going to make it even harder. It's a whole lot easier to do the slow, intentional growth. It's a slog, don't get me wrong. But if you do that slow, intentional growth over 3, 6, 9 months, 12 months, whatever, just keep being, they'll come. They'll find you. And all of a sudden, you're going to get the DMs going, holy crap, where have you been
Yeah.
all my life?
It's so true. And that's why I think it's so important that we are authentic, right? Going back to like the main point of this is we're
Hmm.
authentic with our content. We stand on our values. We are who we are. That when someone meets us in real life, it's like, I feel like I know you because I listened to your podcast and like, oh my goodness, you're so generous. You're so kind. It's like, no, like literally exactly how I am on my podcast is exactly how I am in real life. And
Right.
what you see is what you get, right? I might take out some things that are the ums or the flubs or things like that just to make it more succinct for people, but this is me. That's it. I'm in
There
my
it is.
graphic tees and my leggings constantly, so you will see me in my graphic tees on my YouTube channel. Like, this is how it goes. And so, yeah, I think that it's so important that we are authentically ourselves and that we do go deeper, right? And I think podcasting is such a great way to give us space to go a little deeper on the topics, to be a little more intimate, to share the stories, right? I'm not sharing my story in front of 10,000 people.
Hmm.
I might be a little more hesitant. I might filter myself a little more. No, it's just me and Tracy in a riverside studio talking and having this conversation, and then
Yeah.
it gets shared out into the world later, and I don't have to worry about that.
Right. And you make an interesting point there because I've been lucky enough to be on a stage of 5 and 10,000 in a couple of occasions over the course of my career. And to your point, I was the same person. I was more nervous, obviously. Wow, look at all those people out there. And you're like, oh my God, what if I fumble, stumble, fall, face plant? Then I'll get up and keep talking, whatever, But yeah, you just be yourself and you share the stories. And at the same time, when you're sharing the stories, you share at appropriate levels, right? I'm not going to go on to a podcast about podcasting and go deep into the death of my daughter or go deep into my addiction. I'll share where it's relevant, like I do with
Right.
with you. Okay, you need to know this because that's how I got to that point, and it impacts it.
Right.
Without it, the context kind of disappears. But if I go on, I was just on one 3 days ago, a grieving parents podcast. Now
Oh, right.
we spent 20 minutes just talking about Krista and what happened because the story was relevant. So I shared that story in probably an uncomfortable level of detail.
Mm.
But there's a grieving parent on the other end of that microphone who's probably going to be listening to that in a few weeks going, he gets it because they're going through it right now or they're at risk of about to go through it.
Yeah, that's such an important distinction too, right? Like as someone who's a chronic oversharer,
I'll put my hand up.
finding that distinction of in this space, what makes the most sense? What level of the story? You can still be you. You can
Yeah.
still go deep in the story. Maybe you don't mention other things that are adjacent but not relevant, right? I think that's such an important distinction for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And, I don't know how far we want to dive into storytelling because I love storytelling at its heart and soul. And I spent some time trying to hone my speaking skills
Mhm.
because I originally, back during my Coca-Cola days, I wanted to be Anthony Robbins. I wanted to be Zig Ziglar and Jim Rohn. I wanted to be that guy on the stage that just moved people. And of course, I've made it on a couple of stages for various reasons. However, the microphone, the
Yeah.
podcast, it sucked me in right away. And I used to liken stories to campfires. We've all gone camping. If you haven't, give it a try. But when you're telling stories around the campfire or the campfire cooking food, here we go. The flame matters, but the flavor comes from the smoke.
Mm,
Yeah?
yeah.
So the stories that hit the hardest for me are generally the ones that will have the most fingerprints on it. And not everyone needs to know all 10 of your fingerprints. Maybe you're on a thumb podcast, so you just need to share the 2 thumbs.
I think, too, that speaks to this idea of if you are someone who wants to talk from a place of healing
Mhm.
or being healed from the journey or from the experience, that when you share it, you don't maybe want to share it raw, right?
Right.
That campfire analogy works there too of like, how many times have I touched this experience? Have I healed this experience? Have I addressed this? So that
Mhm.
when I share the story, it's not necessarily a sob story every single
Right.
time, right? That it is a here are the highlights, and I don't have to go too surface level because I haven't addressed it. And I also don't have to go too deep because it still hurts,
Yeah.
right? Like you can find that balance by having all your fingerprints all over it.
It reminds me of a scab.
Yep.
You get a cut, and it starts to heal. First thing it does, it bleeds, obviously, and then it hardens. And then some of us, he raises his hand, pick at it. So it takes longer to heal because you keep picking at the bloody thing.
Mhm.
And then eventually, over time, there's a little pinkness, and then maybe later on, you'll get your coloring back, but you still notice a slight scar. I got one from way back when putting my hand through a window, and it's subtly there, but because I know it's there, I see it more magnified than anyone else. So it's all those different levels. And if you're going on to share the story just so that you could pick at your scab, you're not doing your audience any favors. And you're really not doing yourself any favor because you're just reopening the wound. You're not
Yeah.
ready for that level yet. But if you're just going on to share how you got the scab, okay, well, then we can go there. And then when you're ready for the next level, well, then the scab is probably gone at that point. Or if you have the skill to be able to look at it and not pick, then man, go for it. That's
Right.
that's a tough one.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I think that it's true, right? When we have the power of a microphone in front of us,
Hmm.
as hosts, it is our duty to do the due diligence so that
Hmm.
our audience can be fully impacted. So that, like you said, you want to make an impact. You want to be the person on stage. And a microphone is a great way to reach people wherever they are, right? They don't have to
Right.
travel to see you speak. They don't have to maybe pay money to see you speak. They literally could just put their earbuds in, be walking the dog or driving their kids to school and hear the impactful message that you have to say. And so it is our job to do them the service of here is my story from a place of healing. And
Hmm.
like you said, if we don't do that, or if we're still picking at it,
Yeah.
then it doesn't do them any service. And at that point, it's
The pity me kind of scenario.
which is
Yeah.
that's not what we want to do as
No.
people who have platforms who are trying to really make an impact.
Yeah.
We're not trying to create a pity party around us. We want our audience to grow, to heal, to do that thing that whatever it is that they want to do with their lives to make their lives better, right? And so I think
Hmm.
that we have to keep that top of mind as we're doing that storytelling. It's so important.
I think if you're a podcaster and you're trying to have an impact, sometimes you have to say no.
Mm,
Sometimes you have to say no to a potential guest that just won't serve. I have been lucky enough to have some folks that have come on my show that unfortunately early in this most recent podcast shouldn't have been on the show.
mm,
But because they were a rock and roll star or a movie star, I was like, I'll find a way to make it work.
right.
And I did. I kind of look back at it now and go, okay, well, you were fanboying. It's
Right.
completely different. Or if you've narrowed your audience down and someone comes to you and says, hey, here's all the amazing things I've done. Can I come on your show? And you look at it and go, well, yeah, you did some amazing things on Wall Street, but my show is about bedtime stories for kids. Not sure where that kind of connects.
Right.
And it's tough. And you got to do the due diligence and do the duty and the service to your audience because, God dang it, you spent all the effort to build that audience. you should wrap your arms around it like a protective mom and say, no, stay away from my child kind of
Yeah.
thing, right?
Yes, we have to protect them. And it is so true. There are going to be people you have to say no to, or even you record with and you're like, the audio got lost.
Yeah.
Like, this is just not going to work. Like, I've told my clients, blame it on me if you need to. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
lost the audio, whatever you got to do to make that go away. That's not a good fit for you. So important that we protect our audience. And like you said, we spend so much time nurturing this audience, and podcast listeners love you so much, but you're a fickle bunch. Once it's like fool me once,
She said it. It's
goodbye.
true, but she said it.
Yes, I did. And so, like, we have to protect them, like you said, like your child almost.
Yeah.
And if you aren't sure, okay, well, then what content makes sense in here? I always tell people go guest on some podcasts and hone in on your message. Get
Mm-hmm.
clear on your messaging. If you aren't sure and you're kind of just winging it, podcast might not be the first thing you do. Go guest. Be on other people's podcasts.
There it is.
And so doing that can really help you get clear on that, or even any shifts or adjustments that you're looking to make with your own content to test it out and see what is it that this audience would really need. But yeah, we have to protect them. And sometimes you have to say no to yourself. I
Thank
know
you.
I've had ones where I'm like, oh, this topic is going to be a slam dunk. No, it was not. And I get on there and I'm like, what am
What was I thinking?
what am I doing here? Or I'll
I
send out a list to my audience and I'll say, here are the next 4 solo episodes I'm considering. Which ones do you think? And the one that I'm like, oh, this is it, gets no likes on the poll. And I'm like, well, I guess that's not the one we're
yeah,
doing then.
crickets. What's up? I think that's a challenge that every business owner, if you're a creator of any kind, could be a content creator, it could be a course creator. If you're a business, you're creating some service or product for your
Right.
customer. We think, oh my God, this is the one they want. I did the same thing 2 weeks ago. I had like 6 ideas for the next product for my parents out there. And the one I thought I was just gonna, you know what? I'm just gonna go do this one because this is banging. And I thought, well, no. I had just done a podcast episode about poll the audience,
Yeah.
talk to your marketplace. And I thought, okay, I need to walk the walk and not just talk to talk. So I did it, put it out on my newsletter and say, here it is. Boom. Here's the 6 I'm thinking about. I actually have more, but these are the ones right. And the one I thought was the doggiest of the dogs is the one like 3/4 of the folks voted for. The one you
Yep.
want. That's the one I'll do. And which I I learned that lesson in a different aspect way back in my Coca-Cola days. When I started right out of the military, the business I started was a programming business. So I'm a geek from way back. So here I am using all those geek skills in my planning and marketing job role in Coca-Cola. So we're like all this data. I'm like, oh, data, give me more data. I can manipulate data all day long. And people would see that and go, could you teach us how to do that? And I'm like, what do you mean? To me, it was so second nature
Right.
that I would have never, ever have thought of teaching someone, especially someone who would be my peer, in a different department, how to do that. I'm like, doesn't everybody know how to do this? And that's the same thing when it comes to as a creator. You think because you're so in the weeds that no one wants to hear that message again.
Right.
Here's an alert, ladies and gentlemen. They've heard it 4 times and they still haven't heard it.
Yeah.
If you think you're repeating yourself and your audience hasn't said, stop telling me that, I get it, then you're not repeating yourself enough. Okay?
Yep. It's so true. That thing that comes so innate to us. And that's one reason why I love doing workshops in communities, like smaller communities or groups, because then I go in there and they ask questions and I'm like, it's obvious. That's actually one of my filler words apparently on the show is obviously because my team was
Right.
like, Alesia, everything you say is not always obvious. And I'm like, I'm a Virgo. Everything is obvious.
It's obvious to me.
Right. Exactly. But that can easily tell you, right? So if you maybe don't have an established audience that you can interact with just yet, or you're not as awesome at email marketing as Tracy is, then you can go in other communities, see what questions they ask you as you present your information and note those as, ooh, this would be a good podcast episode to do for
Mhm.
my audience, right?
On that note, I would coach one little tweak for a lot of the folks out there, because going into groups and forums is a great way. I find quite often that folks go in there with the most amazing of intentions. They get sniffed out. Oh, I know what they're trying to do here. All
Uh,
right, I'm just not going to reply. If you go into a group that is the audience you want to speak to for whatever reason, I would coach you first just to listen or read, whatever the medium is. If you're in a Facebook group, just read and see what the questions are or what the opinions are, what the thoughts are. Do you really vibe with this particular audience? And that way, you're a little more knowledgeable of what it is. That way, when you do ask the question, you can ask it in alignment with that group versus
yeah.
just coming in there. And you may have been a member of the group for a year and then you ask the question, you're like, really? Really?
Yeah. It's so true, and I think that that's such a one, podcast guesting is a great way to do that, right? Because you can go back and see what are the past guests have said, and that way you
Yes.
can call back to hosts love that when you call back to previous episodes. You're like, "Oh, yeah, I heard so and so talk about this, and let's go ahead and build on that," right? So, like, we're building on the conversation.
Yes.
No, that's a great way to do it, or to even hear things that the host has said and call back to those, right? It pats them on the shoulder a little bit, makes
Yeah.
you more knowledgeable that you did your
You're awesome.
homework. You're so awesome. You know exactly what we're talking about and what we're going through. And it's so true. Like, there's so many different ways to do that. And I love that. More
I can
intent.
add on to what you
Yes.
just suggest. So if you're not the guest, if you're the podcaster having a guest, one of the things I started doing about a year ago is going out, and it just takes time, right? And you can use AI to help compress this time, but it's still going to take a few minutes. Go out, and especially on YouTube, and find some recent interviews your guest has done. Okay. Now go look at their website and maybe listen to a couple of podcast episodes that they've been on recently, not 4 years ago, recently. Now pull all that in and think about your audience and the messaging around your show, and how can you extract from this potential guest stuff that's relevant to your audience in alignment with the message of your show and not a question they've been asked 47 times in the past 4 months.
Yes.
Because otherwise, why have them on the show? Because your audience can go listen to them somewhere else if you're just going to ask the same questions. And if you ask the same questions, here's what you're going to get. And then a canned answer.
Right.
A professional won't huff,
Right.
but you'll
Hopefully they
see
don't.
that micro expression on their face like, okay, let me go pull out the standard answer and give it to you. It's really, I don't think it's what you're here for. And I don't think your audience is there for that either. At least for me, I'm far more animated. I'm far more inquisitive than that. And again, you can use AI to do this for you and then spit out some information. And you can go, nix, no, yes, I like this, no, get. And now you're prepared. And
Right.
maybe it took you 20 minutes, maybe a half hour. But what you're going to be able to give back to your audience has just went up tenfold because they're going to go, wait a minute, no one's ever asked him that. I know because he's my friend.
Right.
The guest is going to go, holy crap, no one's ever asked me that before. Or they're going
Yep.
to go, this was the most amazing podcast interview I've ever had because simply you took a few minutes and asked them a couple of questions that no one's ever asked. And they're going to go, wow, this guy's awesome or this gal's awesome. So try that.
Yes. Oh, I love that so much. I had someone pitch to be on my show, and I agreed, and then I had to do some follow-up research of,
Hmm.
like, the questions I wanted to ask them, and they had sent me a YouTube video that they had done, and I was like, "It's directly linked to my audience. I could literally share this YouTube video with my audience, but what are some things that I can pull out from the unsaid things?" Right?
Yes.
And so one of the things that the YouTuber had said was like, I know you guys are going to message me about this. I didn't ask for personal details, like boundaries. Okay. How do you create boundaries with your
Yeah.
audience? How do you make yourself say no when people are getting in your DMs and telling you things that you didn't ask for? Right. And so, like,
Mhm.
how can we take this conversation, not just, okay, go watch the video, but like, let's go deeper on, wait, you created that. What's the first step? Oh, boundaries with yourself. That's really interesting. Let's talk
Yeah.
about that, right? Like, she's a YouTuber talking about books. I don't think she's talked about boundaries before, right? And it's to your point, like, how can we go deeper and like ask the questions that the person's never heard? That when that episode goes out, they're excited to share it because it's not just another one that they did.
Yep.
Tracy, this has been so much fun. I literally could talk to you for another hour, but alas, our time
Well,
has
I'll take that
come.
as a compliment.
Yes. Everyone needs to go check out Tracy. Where can people find you, get to know you?
If you have an entrepreneurial flair, go and check out the Dark Horse Entrepreneur at darkhorse.entrepreneur.com. If you're in the self-development world, yoursuccessdna.com. You can check out the website, the podcast, and then, of course, all the socials will be there for you to just click right on through. And I have contact forms on there. And yes, it is me answering and not AI.
Yes. Awesome. Tracy, thank you so much for being on.
It's been my pleasure.